And yes, I very much feel that. I think our society and our culture is very confused about men and women and our roles and kind of even in the church, there's some confusion around, how God, designed genders or how we're supposed to live. And so, yeah, I see Joseph as this very strong figure. And although he says nothing in the Bible, I mean, I don't imagine he was completely silent, but just a very gentle, caring figure, I think.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Saintly Sidekicks. I'm Madeleine Karako, and with us today is Bonnie Way. She is the founder of the Koala Mom blog. She is also a mom of 5 kids and an avid reader. I'm really excited to have her with us today. Bonnie, for those who don't know you, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, for sure. It's so fun to be here and to be chatting with you. As you said, I have 5 kids and their ages 7 to 17 right now. So I'm pretty busy keeping them up with their activities and school and everything. I'm actually a convert. I joined the church when I was in my early 20s. And so at this point, I'm in my early 40s. I've spent half of my life, in the Protestant church and half of my life in the Catholic church. And yeah, I just really love the church and especially the saints. I think the lives of the saints have a lot to teach us.
What encouraged you to convert to the faith? Was there anything in particular, or what happened there?
I met a friend who was a convert actually, and that kind of started me asking some questions because my best friend growing up was Catholic, but growing up it had just been kind of like, well, she goes to this church and I go to this church, and we didn't talk about it. And then I met someone who had converted, and I was kind of like, wow, people convert? Why? And it just kind of led to this journey and a lot of discussions, reading the Catechism, reading Scott Hahn's books, and just kind of discovering the beauty of the church and joining the church.
That's wonderful. A lot of converts that I've spoken with, and I actually met with a woman once who she said her and her husband did like a thorough study of all the different faiths. And they said they would come together after they were avid readers like you. And they said they would come together after they had both looked at everything and would discuss which one kind of had proved that it was the best. And they
Wow.
both came together and they both agreed that Catholicism was the one, which I was, raised Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. So to hear that perspective for me, I was like, wow. I mean, that would be a really cool way to come to it, like a very educational based way of getting to that destination.
Yeah, I grew up in the Lutheran church and I did study the Lutheran church and Martin Luther and what he taught before joining the Catholic church. I'd attended a Lutheran university, so it was easy to do a couple courses there on Luther and the Lutheran church. And yeah, just even that depths of study and then finding the Catholic church was so much more amazing. But I have a lot of friends who've come from different backgrounds, and it's always interesting to kind of compare our journeys and see how we got here and what we learned along the way and even what our backgrounds taught us, in what we know about faith and how we come here. So yeah, it's always interesting.
Yeah, I think it would take a lot of humility to do that too. And I really admire that because I've never faced that in my life of having to switch to such a drastic, thing, especially when like family members are of a different faith. I feel like that would be really challenging to do and go in a different route in that regard. I think it's very brave and very humble, and I commend everybody that does convert to whatever religion it is. That's a huge act of humility, I think. And for RCIA, you did that, you said in your early 20s?
Yes.
Okay. And did they introduce you to the saints at that point, or when did that happen?
So I was already familiar with the saints because, as I mentioned, my best friend growing up was Catholic, and I remember reading saint stories with her. She had, a series of, saint picture books, and so we'd read those, and then we'd, pretend to be different saints when we were playing games sometimes. So when I came into the church, I was already familiar with the saints. And another of the saints that I wanted to talk about today was Saint Margaret of Scotland. I also met her during university before becoming Catholic because during one of my history classes, we had to write a history paper. And I can't remember what the exact topic was, but I chose King Malcolm III of Scotland, who's my background is somewhat Scottish if you go far enough back. And I've always been interested in Scotland. And so I chose this obscure Scottish king who's rather an interesting figure. I kind of compare King Malcolm and Saint Margaret. They were husband and wife. Compared them to the king and queen in the Disney movie Brave.
Mhm.
Fergus and Eleanor, like that's who they remind me of, is this, this big, huge, rough and tumble king, and then this very gentle, cultured woman. But anyways, in university, I was writing this paper about King Malcolm, and he's, yes, a very obscure king, and there's nothing written about him. There's no books about King Malcolm. So I ended up researching him by researching kind of all the figures around him, researching his wife, who's a Catholic saint. So that was very handy. There's a lot written about her. And researching, the English king that he fought, and researching just other figures in that same time period, and finding a paragraph in this book and a paragraph in that book. So that was kind of, and Queen Margaret was always a very interesting figure to me, as this woman who came in and had a huge influence on King Malcolm and what Scotland became after that. And then, yeah, becoming Catholic, that just kind of deepened my interest in her.
And did she have children as well, or
Yes, they have 8 children, and one of her sons, David, is also a Catholic saint.
wow, I didn't know that. How
Hmm.
incredible. So that's amazing that you learned about the saints before converting even. That's fantastic. And did you like have life experience that drew you even closer to her or as you continue going through the Catholic faith, or was she just someone that was always kind of in the background that you really admired?
She's someone who's kind of in the background, as someone I really admired. As yeah, this woman who had a large influence, was very much a leader. So many women in history are overlooked or not mentioned, and yet she, as I said, almost had a bigger role than her husband, because of the influence that she had, and then to be a mother of 8 children. That to me is also amazing, just to raise all those children in that era, and the fact that one of her sons became a saint himself. To me, that spoke of the depth of her faith and her ability to pass that faith on, to raise her children, with a strong foundation in faith and in their relationship with God. And then when we were expecting my fourth daughter, we had always kind of played with different saint names for our kids, and so some of them are named for saints, and we often looked up their due dates, and nobody else had a really interesting saint on their due date. But when I looked up my fourth daughter's due date, it was Saint Margaret of Scotland. And at this point, my oldest daughter had been born on her due date. My second daughter was born a week late. My third daughter was born 2 weeks late. And so when I was expecting my fourth, my midwives were kind of like, "Oh, she'll be late. It's just you go overdue." And her due date was St. Margaret's feast day. And so I just started asking St. Margaret. I said, "Please, please pray for my pregnancy. Please pray for my labor, and please pray that she arrives on her due date." And she arrived on her due date. So her middle name is Margaret.
Wow, how cool is that? Oh my gosh. I never get babies on my due date ever. So that's a feat. That's a definitely an answered prayer right there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I see a lot of you in that description of St. Margaret of Scotland. I mean, you're very much a leader in your family as well. You homeschool that all five, don't
Yes.
you? Or okay, you do.
Um, I have homeschooled all five. I have never homeschooled all five at the same time. So my oldest went to kindergarten at a Catholic school, and then she did grades 1 through 7 homeschooling, and then she went back to Catholic high school for grade 8. And so currently I have 2 teenagers in Catholic high school, and then my younger 3 children are going into grades 3, 5, and 7 in, it's called a homeschool blended program here. So they're 2 days a week in a classroom with other kids, and 3 days a week they're homeschooling with me. And yeah, at different times in the past, we've done full-time homeschooling, and so it's been a little bit of a mix of sort of different school situations, but mostly homeschooling.
And obviously, you educate them in the faith at home and just in a variety of ways. And I know the Koala Mom blog, the name is kind of about how the koalas hold on to their young, right? And you kind
That
of
always
embody
spoke to
that.
me. Yes,
Yeah.
the image of a koala, mom with all the babies kind of hanging off her. I felt like that a lot as a mom, a lot of baby wearing, and homeschooling really spoke to me as a way to work our faith into everything that we do. So a lot of my curriculum that I chose was Catholic curriculum, so that in the language arts and the stories they're reading, in our history, in everything that we're doing, the kids are learning about the faith. And so we're talking about saints, we're learning about the history of the church. They're reading saint stories in their reading. There's a lot of the faith that's just woven through our homeschooling curriculum, and I really liked that.
I love that, and I do think that even if you don't homeschool, being able to foster the education of just the faith at home is so helpful, and especially with the curriculum that kind of has that already built in. It's so nice. You don't have to work as
Helps a
hard.
lot.
Yeah.
It makes it easier when the curriculum is bringing up those discussions, right? I think it facilitates those discussions, but there's so many other ways in our homes we can have those discussions. Just lots of different ways. The other books that we're choosing for our kids, the artwork in the home, things they see at church, a lot of things even out in the world that can facilitate those discussions and just be ways to open up, talk with our kids about what we believe in and how that applies to our lives.
Saint Margaret of Scotland, wasn't she also very like she gave to the poor and served them? At least I think I
Yes.
remember reading that she would I forget the exact amount, but she would often not eat until she had helped a certain amount of orphans. I can't remember what the number was, but she had like this system of I have to help first before serving myself.
Yeah, I don't know that exact story, but there are a lot of stories of, yes, her going out and helping. She was very much, I guess, the hands and feet of Jesus to the people in her community. There was a lot of war at the time. King Malcolm III fought something like three battles, like waged war three times on England. So there was a lot of, instability and unrest between Scotland and England at the time, which I can imagine caused a lot of poverty and problems. And she lived around the 1100s, I believe. And she, yeah, spent a lot of time helping the people, bringing food, taking care of sick people, and even involved King Malcolm in that. So there's some stories of him going out with her and helping the people in their village with different needs. And yeah, I find that amazing. That's very much, what Jesus told his disciples at the Last Supper of the first among you must be the servant. And so, even though she's the queen, she's getting down on her hands and knees and just helping her people where they need help. And I think that, yeah, that is so important. And that speaks to me as a mom. That's so often what we do as moms, right? We're, cleaning up after sick kids. We're taking care of all the daily stuff. And sometimes it can feel humdrum, especially I know like years ago when my kids were little, when they're all under 10 and it's just so much work. There's so much cleaning and so many needs and it can just feel overwhelming. And it does get easier now that I've got teenagers. It's easier. But yeah, to have this example of Saint Margaret of that, even in the scrubbing the floors and the washing the dishes and doing everything else that my family needs, I am, being Jesus' hands and feet to them. I'm loving them through this, and I can be like Saint Margaret in that way.
How beautiful that to have that, and I really it's so nice that she was a queen because my daughter, she always, wants to play princesses or
Mm.
queens, and
Uh-huh.
so whenever there's a saint with a crown on her head, I'm like, "Look, look. A
Yeah.
princess, a queen, we can make this fun."
Yeah. We've definitely done that for All Saints Day is dress up as Saint Margaret. A couple of my girls have done that a couple times. So yeah, it's find a fancy dress, put on a crown, maybe find a little touch to make it look Scottish, but yeah, they can go as Saint Margaret of Scotland. So yeah.
And it's so her feast day is your daughter's birthday then?
Yes, November 16th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. How special. And does she recognize that, or how old is she now?
Yeah, she's 9 now. So yes, she totally knows this connection. Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that so much. And the other saint that you mentioned when we were talking was Saint Joseph. Can you tell me about your connection with him?
So my connection to him is also a birthday. His feast day is my birthday. March 19th is his big feast day. And I have to say, just as a Catholic going through Lent, it's very handy to have a major saint's feast day as your birthday. Don't have to worry about fasting on that day. St. Joseph and, trying to think back when I felt this connection to him. And I don't remember where it began, but it's been a long time. Just, yeah, learning about him and just feeling very drawn to him and to his story. One of the things that I guess drew me to St. Joseph is the fact that he's very silent, I guess. There are no words of his in the Bible. And I'm a writer. I do deal with words all the time. And yet we have nothing that St. Joseph has spoken. He's very much a man of quiet action. But he was very much there for Mary and Jesus through everything that they went through, completely supported and loved them, and just, yeah, built this home for them and this safe space for them, and protected them from the dangers of the early world and from King Herod and from everything else that they were going through. And there's just something about his story and him as a father figure that I find just incredibly inspiring and touching.
And so there's absolutely nothing actually written about him in the Bible, correct? Or is there like he doesn't not any like words of his, right?
No words of Saint Joseph's. Very little. I guess we know like his genealogy, and we know what he did, kind of around Jesus' birth. And then after that, the Bible is silent about him. So most of what we know about Joseph is kind of based on maybe legend or just, kind of assumptions and guesses based on other things we know about the period. So yeah, he's kind of almost this mysterious figure. Yeah.
But definitely a piece there for sure.
Mhm.
The Saints Alive. Have you guys listened to the Saints Alive
Yes.
podcast?
Yes,
They
we really
did
like
one about Saint Joseph recently, or I don't know if it was recently, but I loved the sort of theatrics that they put in that episode. They kind of depicted him literally defending Mary and Jesus, and like kind of hoarding off a soldier,
Yes.
and it just gave you a
Yes.
little more imagery of what he might have done in order to keep
Right.
them safe, because obviously they were on the run and trying to get to a safe place. And I love that image of him as a protector. But I
Mhm.
also appreciate what you said, that he was silent and not boastful, and just like what an incredible image of a masculine figure in today's world that is
Mhm.
just a silent protector. And
Yes.
I love that image for my sons in particular, and also for my daughter though, to see that and have that to look to as like a man that is let's see, I don't know if worthy is the right word, but in my motherly perspective, like a
Mhm.
man worthy of my daughter would be, someone like Saint Joseph is
Yes.
what I would hope for. And do you have all daughters, or do you have sons as well?
I have four girls and one little boy. My youngest is a boy. And yes, I very much feel that. I think our society and our culture is very confused about men and women and our roles and kind of even in the church there's some confusion around, how God, designed genders or how we're supposed to live. And so yeah, I see Joseph as this very strong figure. And although he says nothing in the Bible, I mean, I don't imagine he was completely silent, but just a very gentle, caring figure, I think. And I do love that portrayal of him in the Saints Alive story of this protector figure who, yeah, he would have had to defend Mary and Jesus from the dangers, and that it was a very dangerous time. There's a lot of art. Most art portrays Saint Joseph as an old man, or there's a lot of legends that portray Saint Joseph as an old man. But I kind of loved. I think it's. I have Donald Calloway's Consecration to Saint Joseph. I
Mm.
really like this. It's a fantastic book. I've read through it several times, and he goes through what we know about Saint Joseph, I guess, and he argues for a younger Saint Joseph, actually, that based on, the long journeys that they had to do and the fact that Saint Joseph had to physically protect Mary and Jesus from so many things, that he would have had to be a younger man. And so these portrayals of Jesus or of Joseph as an older man are likely not historically correct. I also have this book, The Silent Night, was very interesting. It's another historical look at Saint Joseph and kind of just how the doctrine around Saint Joseph and what we know about Saint Joseph developed. And so she talks about also this portrayal of Saint Joseph as an old man and why that's, maybe not correct, but how that idea came about. And so yeah, that's very interesting when we look at what we know about him and how we think about him.
I'll have to pick those up because I haven't read very much about him. I've always felt a kinship with him just sort of naturally, but I would love to learn more about him. There's so many great consecrations to him, and I've never done one. Do
Mhm.
you and your family do that together, or have you guys ever done one together?
So we actually started with one together with Colleen Presspitch's Consecration to Mary. She has a kid's Consecration to Mary, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a lovely, lovely picture book. very short, very accessible. And so I did that one with my children. And then I think I found this one a few years later. And at that point, yeah, I had already, started growing my interest in St. Joseph. And so I picked up this one and I've done this one just on my own. It is quite a thick book. You need, I don't know, like half an hour each day to read what Donald says about St.
Hmm.
Joseph and to read the prayers and do it. I think he does have a shorter way to do it, but it is worth doing the entire book. It is quite a thick book, but it's very beautiful and yeah, very good.
And do you have figures in your life that are like a Saint Joseph figure to you, like a dad or an uncle or anybody that ever emulated that for you, or has it always been Saint Joseph was kind of where you found that piece?
I think St. Joseph was where I found that piece. So I would say, yeah, for people who maybe don't have a father figure, a good father figure in their lives. So I didn't. Both my father and my first husband were not healthy people who treated me badly. And I've been, working through that. My first husband and I separated 4 years ago. And so there's been a lot of, growth and healing in then and since then. And kind of leaning on St. Joseph has been helpful to, yeah, to have a father figure that I can look to, and to sort of help release the pain of my relationship with my own dad, and to turn to God as a father and Saint Joseph as a father, and to take a new look at fatherhood and to see it as this good, caring, loving. That Saint Joseph is that sort of figure. He is what a father should be, and to, yeah, like I said, let go of some of the hurt in my own life around fatherhood and men who weren't there for me when I needed them.
And do you see your own children kind of leaning towards that as well? Have they been able to follow your example in that, or is that something that you think will come later? Are they still a little too young?
It might come later. I don't know. I mean, I think at this time they choose saints, more like your daughters with, oh, this one's a princess saint. I like her. So yeah, it is interesting to see which saints they are drawn to, which saints attract them. But yeah, I haven't seen anybody who's particularly drawn to Saint Joseph yet. When I was in the second home that we moved into after the separation, I really wanted to create a very welcoming space. I was working hard to make sure our home was a safe, welcoming space. And so I consulted with a friend of mine about, how to use the decor and other things to create this space that I wanted for our family. And one of her pieces of advice was to use artwork for that. So to choose some artwork and then to kind of plan the rest of the decor around that, to use the colors, or I don't know, the vibes, as my teenager would say, from the artwork. And so right away, St. Joseph popped into my head because, I already had this relationship with him. And I was like, okay, I'd like to, find some St. Joseph artwork. That was hard. A lot of Saint artwork. And there's a lot of St. Joseph artwork, and most of it shows him as a very old man or a man on the edges of the scene, and most of them are nativity scenes. And I was like, I don't want Christmas on my walls. I want, something that shows St. Joseph in a better way. And so I was going through art, and occasionally I'd show it to, one of my girls. My second is very artistic and very decorative herself, and she'd be like, no, not that. That's too nativity. And it took a lot of time, but finally I found these prints from Just Love Prints. So it's a set of three that show Mary and Joseph and Jesus. And I honestly struggled with this one of St. Joseph and baby Jesus at first, when I first looked at that, because as I said, that wasn't my experience of a father and baby. And so that one I've had to sit with and to look at that and go, a father can be loving, and a father can be this figure who delights in his children, and to just sit and pray with that. But yeah, these hang in our dining room, and that's just a reminder of the Holy Family and kind of the space that we want to create in our home is this space of relationship, of staying close to Jesus, of, yeah, being a family together and having a close relationship.
It's very brave of you to keep that image up, even if it was causing pain at first. I can imagine that that would be very hard to leave that up, but what a great example for your children to see and to aspire to, to have that connection with Saint Joseph in that way, and just a healthy, loving relationship with a masculine figure. I know that that can be such a challenge if the masculine figures in your life have not been that way. And what a wonderful person to turn to. And I do think that sometimes God and Jesus, really more for me anyway, God is a little harder to connect with, just because
Hmm.
there's not a lot of imagery that
Hmm.
at least I've seen where I feel a connection with. Obviously, we have a lot more with Jesus, like a lot more films, a lot more paintings where it feels more, I guess, familiar is the word I'm looking for.
Hmm.
But then again, with Saint Joseph, just yet another figure of what a father ought to look like in a family situation, and to have that to cling to and to hold to is a really
Hmm.
wonderful thing that you've given your family.
That's something else I really love about both the church and the saints is, over the last few years, I've also been learning about neurodiversity as I realized that a couple of my kids have ADHD,
Mm.
and one of them has very high sensory needs. So in learning about his sensory needs, I've been recognizing my own sensory needs. But then I also see in the church how the church in so many ways nurtures our faith in a very kind of hands-on physical sensory way. There's so much in the church, like in the mass, where we see, we hear, we smell, we taste. It just engages all of our senses. And so I think artwork, and the church's tradition of artwork, and particularly artwork of the saints, can just really draw us in. And we can really use, paintings like this or artwork in churches to deepen our devotion to saints. Our church has a lot of stained glass windows, and so we spend a lot of time, before mass starts, we sit and look around the church and talk about the windows or the statues of the saints, and why does St. Joseph hold lilies, or why does St. Joseph hold carpenter's tools, or baby Jesus, or, some of the other stained glass windows. And okay, can you guess who that saint is because of, this part or that part? And so I think just that ability to see, and to like the images help us remember, help us connect with different parts of the saint, and I think that's very important and that's very beautiful.
Can you remind me? I know a little bit of why Saint Joseph holds lilies, but what is the reasoning behind that? Is
I
there like a
think
symbolism there, or
yes, I think it's usually white lilies, and I think it's connected to purity or chastity,
okay?
because he and Mary both basically remained virgins or chaste in their relationship. So yeah, I believe that's why Saint Joseph holds white lilies.
Okay. It's interesting because he and Mary are associated with them, which I really like. I like that they have that connection with that particular flower, because I know when my husband and I got married, we placed white lilies by a statue of Mary.
Yes.
And then later I learned that Saint Joseph was also associated with white lilies. And
Hmm.
I always now, I don't know, I wish that we could put white lilies next to like a statue of both of them.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
that would
that
be
is,
cool.
especially as you like start a marriage, I wish that there was, a statue
Mhm.
of a couple instead of just Mother Mary. But yeah, I do love that they are connected by that flower.
Yeah, that's true. There's, consecration to Mary and consecration to Joseph. And in some ways, to me, the Holy Family is, both of these, like both of them are so important, in our faith, and to look up to them as examples for our family. And yeah, I love thinking about, those first 30 years of Jesus' life that we know nothing about, to think about what life would have been like for Mary and Joseph and Jesus, and what sort of family that would have been, and to think about, the little bits of the story that we do know, and yeah, try to imagine the bits that we don't know.
Do you feel like with your the Koala Mom blog, you've kind of created a little community for yourself? I know that I've read it and I've seen so many interviews where you've connected different moms to all these people. Has that helped you in your motherhood as well?
Yes, that has been, um, yeah, I really felt as, I look back on my early experience of motherhood with my first couple of daughters, and I just felt very isolated and alone. I was among the first of my friends to get married and the first of my friends to have a baby. And so I didn't have that community. And at the time I was writing a blog. I've been blogging for coming up on 20 years now. So I wrote about that a lot, and in some ways, reached out to other moms online, and started finding some community there. With, for a long time, I chatted with a mom in Australia. Actually, we had similar experiences of motherhood, and we would chat a lot. She also blogged, and so yeah, I found a lot of community there, a lot of ways to connect with other moms, and yeah, I just wanted to, in some way, do something to help other moms not feel alone, to know that, that there are seasons of motherhood that are hard, that are difficult, and but we're here to support each other. We can listen, to share whatever advice I've learned that, maybe has made it a bit easier. And yeah, to bring up one more saint, I see that in Mary and Elizabeth is
Mm.
the relationship that they have, that, and that God told Mary when he told her that she was going to have Jesus, he said, even your cousin is pregnant. And so basically connected her immediately to this family member, this friend who could support her and be there for her. And I think that's beautiful. That, early in her pregnancy, she had another woman to walk through this with her. And I mean, I'm sure Joseph was there with her. We don't know if Joseph went to Elizabeth. He probably took her there, or maybe stayed with her, maybe went back to Nazareth and then went back to get her later. But yeah, that she had this other woman figure to learn from, to be with during that time when she needed it so much. I think that's amazing.
Thank you for mentioning that. I had never connected that in my head that God provided community for Mary right off the bat and her cousin who was also pregnant. Because just like you said, when you're a pregnant mom, it can be incredibly isolating, especially I can imagine for Mary, who obviously had her own set of complications by,
Yes.
being a virgin mother and so young as she was. So thank you for
Hmm.
mentioning that. That's what a good God to provide that for her. And I had never even put
Hmm.
that piece together before. I really love that imagery. Thank you. Wow, I'm going to sit with that for a little while. And I appreciate so much the Koala Mom blog that you've put together. And it's nice to have a space like that online where, because so many mom spaces can sometimes become very negative and comparing, and your blog is not. It's such a refreshing source of just lots of great information, a lot of community. I can relate to so many people that are writing on there and all the things that you've included. So thank you so much for providing that. I can't believe you've been doing that for 20 years. That's incredible. Congratulations. That's a long time.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate the appreciation, because, yeah, I mean, a lot of time you're an online content creator too. So I know a lot of time it seems like we put it out there, and there's much less feedback now than there was, a decade or 20 years ago. A lot of us, we just read content, and we don't comment or leave feedback. So it does help to hear feedback. And I very much approach it with my intention is, find what works for you. And so it's here, I'm sharing some of the things that have worked for me. Some, I invite other people to share what's worked for them. But I think, motherhood is a journey where we have to figure out, where our community is and where our supports are and what's going to work for us. And it might look different for all of us, or it might look different in different seasons with different kids, because even each of our kids is unique and bring their own little mix to this, journey of motherhood. And it's amazing.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for sharing your perspectives on those saints and for coming on today. And also, this is long overdue. Thank you, but you are the first person who interviewed me when I started my shop 5 years ago. So that was like my first official interview. Was the one you were generous enough to give to me, and I remember I felt like such a big deal when it came out. So thank you for that. It was a boost of self confidence that I needed.
Oh, that's so fun. I do love interviewing other moms and just kind of, yeah, lifting up others and saying, there are so many amazing creative women, who are spreading the faith, and each of us, with our own little gifts and talents, and just, yeah, just spreading God's love and the faith to other people. And I think that's amazing.
You're doing a great job of that. Thank you for lifting me up and everybody that you are generous with your blog, and keep up the good work.
You too.
Thank you.